Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Hager number 254 US2C in a right hand. This is a reinforcing pivot. This is a piece of equipment that is used generally when a client is made aware of it, that it exists. It's generally when they'll use this. So this is a reinforcing pivot, and what this contraption does is it allows you, and they're handed from Hager. I don't know that they have a non-handed version. So the one that I'm familiar with is handed. This gadget will allow you to mitigate a problem with the top hinge on a door. A client will come in and say, "Yeah, I need a new metal door." Why? A truck drove into it. Break-in, vandalism, rust, fatigue, failure, whatever. And they'll say that the top hinge plate broke. Okay. So when someone says that, I think, well, that hinge plate is still in the door, and the client will always say, "Yep, I heard it. It fell all the way to the bottom and it stopped." And so first thing is, you've got the hinge plate, so you can possibly repair it. Getting it out of the bottom of the door, bringing it back up into the top of the door. First of all, drilling some holes top and bottom of the hinge plate and into the edge of the door. You can bring that plate back into the door, screw a hinge to it, and use the hinge as a handle, and you can plug weld that plate back. So that's an option. That's a good option. Also, what you can do is use a continuous geared, aluminum continuous geared hinge. From Hager, it would be a Roton. You can, of course, replace the door. You can also use a reinforcing pivot. What this does is it doesn't carry any weight of the door, but applying this to the door, that's the door portion, that's the header portion. From your perspective, that door is going to be a left-hand reverse. Okay? This vertical axis of pivoting is going to line up with your hinges. Okay, you'll get this placed laterally on the door in the correct plumb position, right down through the vertical axis of pivoting through those hinges, right through the barrels. And this will solve that problem. Okay, doesn't carry the weight of the door, and the reason that top hinge always breaks because the top hinge carries 70% of the weight of the door. So when you go to a reinforcing pivot like this, you are now having the hinges that are remaining on the door doing all of the work of carrying it. But I often see these pivots installed in new construction in one particular national fast food chain. They have a separate, it's an area where the garbage dumpster is kept, and maybe some trash compacting is done there. I don't really know. But they always have a pair of doors on that, and they will, from day one, install those as new equipment. They obviously have found that they are needed down the road, and it will definitely keep your door and frame in the right position because it's forcing that to occur there. Okay, and that's what this is used for. And those other options, repairing the door, replacing the door using a continuous geared hinge, those are all good. This is another weapon, so to speak, in your arsenal to repair or to mitigate that sort of problem. It's not too unsightly. I've seen these left just in the 2C, or the zinc coated steel base finish that they come in. That's the only color these come in. I've also seen them painted over. Disguise it however you like or don't. But it is definitely an option for you. You'll see that there is a inset that's there. The door portion is a little further in that way because a typical hollow metal door and frame, that door is going to be inset about 90 thousandths of an inch. This is the header here. The downside of installing these is, and a client might say, "Yeah, I know that header is packed with mortar, so you better give me a continuous hinge." Okay, it's the same problem, just 30 times down the side. So you're going to have to contend with, a header that's likely packed with mortar, filled in after it's been installed in a masonry wall with wire or T-anchors. And there's no easy way around that, unless, and I've seen people do it, you weld it to the header. I'm not necessarily an advocate of that, because it will make the next person's job a bit more challenging when they've got to cut all that weld off. But nonetheless, that's another option that you can do that to avoid having to drill and then clear that concrete out behind there. And plus, there's unlikely any reinforcement there. There would be no reason for there to be any in that position. So be mindful that you're going to be trying to get screws into a hole that's filled with concrete that maybe you use Tapcons or a concrete screw. And I know people have done that in the past. I've spoken to them about that, and they said, yeah, you know what, I'm just going to use Tapcons. That's what I'm going to do. Okay, so they drill a hole. They drill that proper size hole through the steel itself, and then go in with like a 1/4-inch flathead Tapcon. Would require, I think, a 3/16 diameter drill bit. Don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And then through the door, it's going to come with a couple of sex bolts and then just thread-forming sheet metal screws. This weighs 1.36 pound, is what this weighs, and is a legitimate way by which to go about mitigating a door problem. Let's continue with the visual tour. You're going to get wood screws and machine screws. 2, 4, 6. 2, 4, 6. Hold on. Yeah, there are 8 machine screws and 8 wood screws. You really don't need double the amount of screws on everything, but that sheet metal screw that's there, it's got a thread forming tip on it that you can see. They are going to include 2 female halves of a sex bolt package, and per the installation instructions, they are to go here and here. Putting them up closer, you're probably going to hit the construction of the door, the top channel, and that's why they don't give you 4, because they know it's going to be dreadful to drill through the steel, and then you're going to hit the top cap or the inverted or the channel that's up there when they bring the steel over the U channel or C channel. So they don't put them there because it's awfully close to the top of the door. So a couple of just thread forming screws, and then the through bolts will go down here. Okay, what you do up here again is what you end up doing up there. And you can see how this is certainly handed. This is a right-hand version. If you have a right-hand reverse door or a left-hand door, you'll need the opposite hand of this. Installation instructions will also be included along with a template. Let's switch to the screen view now and take a closer look at all of that supporting documentation. Here is the item that we are looking at. And before we go much further, let's just make sure that we're not in the wrong place, so to speak. We want to make sure that we understand that there are different sizes available for these reinforcing pivots from Hager. They have to have different models based on the width of the hinge, because that dimension from the face of the door or the header to the vertical axis of pivoting is different based on a 4.5 or a 5-inch. This, of course, is a 5-inch version. So only be looking at this when you're dealing with a hinge that's 5-inch wide. So be mindful of that. You could have you couldn't have a 4.5 by 5. You could have a 4 by 5. Is what you could have if you had a wide throw hinge, I suppose. But be mindful. You're probably looking at this because you have a 5 by 5 hinge is where you'd be looking for this. You could have, I don't know if, well, there's probably a 6 by 5 as well, but you've got to have a 5-inch wide hinge for this one to work. They do have different models, as you can well imagine. They have a 251, which they say is for a 3.5 inch. They've got the 253, of course, that's for the most common 4.5 inch version. And then, of course, the 254. Let's look at the product catalog that should illustrate those other models that are available as well. And we did miss the 252. That's available. Okay. And as we study this a little bit, we're going to see that we have 3.5, 4, 4.5, and 5-inch wide hinges. They indicate that they're all non-handed. It must be that the 254 I have here in front of me is an older, just must be new old stock if it's truly non-handed. So be mindful that they may be handed, but they're possibly not handed. You can see how the design has changed to where they can literally take the plate and they can flip it around and make it compatible with what you're working on. Meaning there are 3 holes in the door portion. Okay, can't really see it too well. 1, 2, 3. You'll just remove these bolts and move this over to this hole, and then you'll have the opposite hand. This is how that works. Also on this page is a pivot set that they have, just unrelated to what we're working on in the sense of potentially repairing a top hinge or mitigating a problem with a hollow metal door and frame where the top hinge or some sort of hanging feature has no longer works or has failed. But nonetheless, there's the product catalog. There's also a link to the template. Let's take a closer look at that. This is a document that will govern all of the sizes available from Hager. And as you can see, they don't list a 4x5. That'd be pretty unusual to have a wide throw in a 4-inch tall on a hollow metal door, which is likely where you're going to use this. So they don't list it. I don't see why there'd be a problem of it working. But that's 6x5. Okay. Yeah. So they make no declaration as to whether or not standard or heavyweight are a problem, because that information is omitted, and that vertical axis of pivoting is maintained. I see no trouble with using a heavy or standard weight application when using this, or having that application when using the reinforcing pivot. There's that inset that I had mentioned earlier. You can see it, referred to here. Okay. Dimension A is the important dimension. Face of the door to the vertical axis of pivoting. Now that could change if you have an unusual backset, of course, on your installation. If you did not have a 1/4 inch backset, you might have trouble with that. So in a 5-inch application, the hinge center line to the back of the leaf, that's going to be 2.5 inch. So you'll have 1.5 inch here. So 2.5 minus 1 inch is 1.5 inch. Okay, 1/4 inch backset. So you probably want to review that. But in standard applications, this reinforcing pivot is going to work splendidly. Then there's a link to the installation instructions, and here they are. Let's take a closer look at it. And really, installing it is super straightforward. It's, not that you don't need to read the installation instructions, but most of what you're going to do is likely already obvious. You have to maintain that vertical axis of pivoting. That is the cardinal rule for installing this, obviously. So let's take a look. To locate pivot on frame, hold combination square in corner of the frame as shown. Okay, that's pretty easy. And place installation template against square exactly as shown. Now, there is no template inside of this box, and I was unable to find a template on the Hager site, so you might be laying that out by hand. Hopefully your box will include a template where you can save the trouble of laying it all out by hand based on the dimensions here, okay? Because they don't really give you a reference point, actually. Yeah, there's no way to know laterally of where to install all of these. So you're going to need that piece of hardware. The hardware will become the template should you not have a paper template in the box. So, step 2, drill holes as required per the schedule. Metal frame, drill a .201 diameter hole or a number 7 for the 1/4 machine screw and tap these holes. If material thickness is not sufficient, or when hollow metal frames are not reinforced, use a number 14 sheet metal screw. Okay, sure. Yeah, absolutely. The pivot's not going to be carrying any weight. It's just going to keep the door from laterally falling out of the opening. So there's not going to be a lot of stress on those screws. So overthinking it in that regard is probably unnecessary. Wood frame, drill pilot holes, and install the wood screws that are included. Step 3, when door is in place, check to be sure that hinges are firmly attached and there is proper clearance between the door and frame at all sides of the jamb and door bottom. What they're saying is here, make sure that you have your proper margins everywhere. If it's 1/8 of an inch, make sure you have 1/8 of an inch on the 2 jambs between the door and the header. Make sure all of that's correct. If not, shim it in place, because the point is you're bringing the door back to a proper healthy installation. And with the top hinge broken, the door will not automatically be in the proper, true plumb level and square orientation to the frame. You'll need to shim it. So expect to have to shim it back into place. If the door tends to sag away from hinge jam at top, drive wedges between the door and a frame and door at the opposite strike side and realign hinges until door is properly positioned to swing free. Step 4, place door portion of pivot with pin in place on the door and move into position so that the pin enters the bronze bushing. Put this part on the door and push it up is the bottom line. Get it to where it seats or makes light contact with bearing flange. Hold firmly in place, parallel with head of door, and mark hole locations. Okay. Repeat the drilling instructions as they mentioned earlier. A number 7 drill would be the best. There are fractional sizes and then there are numbered sizes. The right size for a 1/4-20 hole that you're going to tap is a number 7. There is no fractional size that's .201. You want a number 7. It's crucial that when you're tapping holes that the diameter of the hole that you're drilling is correct. Otherwise, your tapping might be extremely frustrating, if not impossible. Last note here, use 2 through bolts, sex bolts, furnished with each pivot. Use as required for hollow metal doors or mineral core doors. And they'll go down here as they're indicated. Drill a 1/4 inch hole through the door and large hole on the side opposite of the pivot only to 3/8. So on the push side of the door, you need to have 3/8 over here because the body is going to require 3/8. But the bolt that will go into the male portion that will go into the female portion, you only need a 1/4 inch hole. So that'd be .25. So you're going to need 3 drill bits for sure. A number 7, well, possibly a 7. I don't. I think for sure you're going to need a number 7, and then you may or may not need the 1/4 or 3/8. So you'll need either 1 bit or you'll need 3. I would always recommend through bolting it. I mean, you're fixing a problem, so definitely through bolting it. So that's a pretty handy document that they have here. Pretty simple and straightforward as well. Let's see what else we have. Okay, that's the template. We've done that. The product catalog, we've done that. The installation instructions, we have done that as well. Now, if we were to search the site for Hager reinforcing pivot, we'll be able to locate all of the units that we have listed here. You'll find all of them. Same sort of data is down below, just the 4 different sizes. And then finally, there's a link here below this video to the manufacturer's page. When you click on that, you'll be able to pull up not only all of the Hager products we sell by means of this horizontal navigation, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. That's several hundred pages of everything and all things Hager related. I would encourage you to review that. They have a comprehensive offering of material right on their cover. Block sets, closers, weather stripping, residential hinges, residential cylinders, that's called a profile cylinder, bypass, pocket, bifold, sliding, low energy automatic door operators, exit devices, pin and barrel hinges, trim and auxiliary, commercial hinges, Roton, the continuous geared aluminum hinges, electrified hardware, accessory hardware like filler plates for use in metal doors and frames, signage, a whole mess of other stuff that you will have access to. Let's wrap up this video on camera. In conclusion, I think it's pretty low-hanging fruit to use an item like this. To replace an entire metal door because of a broken hinge plate, sure, it's done. I can't argue that that's going to be the appropriate way to go in lots of installations. The back of a strip mall, that fast food chain I was talking about earlier, where they have an enclosure around their dumpsters that are in the parking lot. You know, is anyone really going to notice that it looks less than original? I notice it because I sell these, but, you know, I don't know that I would shy away from this just because of the look. Yeah, sure, it's going to look different, but it's a lot less expensive in installation. If, you know, the first time I did a continuous geared aluminum hinge, I was front to back in 1 hour. I mean, the first time I ever did it, it took me an hour. The only time that this is going to cause you fits is when you are really contending with what's going to be packed inside of the header. Would I shy away from it for that reason alone? Okay, what's the alternate? The alternate is a Roton, same problem. The alternate is a new door, a lot more money, probably may not be in stock, ready to ship. Those types of scenarios. So be mindful. There is no perfect, cheap answer to fixing a problem. I mean, I would be prone to welding the hinge plate back is what I would be prone to because, you know, people who do this sort of service work, they rely on the skill set that they have. I can weld. That would be my first way to... I would weld it rather than... I would repair the damage rather than drill and tap is what I would do. Because, again, that header's not reinforced. There's nothing that you're tapping to. And you're going to rely on, you know, a marginal at best installation up at the header. I noticed that they show the holes are offset from each other in the header portion, but they're not like that. It's more like just a standard butt hinge. The name Hager is quite synonymous with all such hardware. They have a very loyal client base. They've been in business since the mid-19th century. That's not an exaggeration. You didn't hear wrong. There are likely, I believe, 5 generations of Hagers that operate the Hager Hinge Company. And you kind of can't go wrong when you've got a company with well over 150 years of knowledge in the industry. Any questions on the 254 reinforcing pivot or any other Hager product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you. Again, thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up. Please subscribe and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.